Sarah Pelk from the town of Poultney, and Sarah's here to give us a little background from her perspective on the issues we've been talking about with the trails bills. Sarah, why don't you introduce yourself for the record and tell us what you do with the town of Poultney.
Sure, thank you. My name is Sarah Pelkey. I am the Community Development Director for the town of Poultney. I could provide a little bit of background if you're ready for me to launch.
Yeah, before you do, we'll just go around the table quickly so that you know who you're talking to.
Okay.
I'll start. I'm David Durfee. I'm the chair of the committee, and I represent the towns of Shaftesbury and Sunderland and Glastonbury, south of you, down in Bennington County.
Sure. Hi, Heather Supernat, Vice Chair. I represent Windsor 4, which are the towns of Barnard, Pomfret, and Bridgewater.
Hi, John O'Brien. I represent Royalton and Tunbridge.
Mike Rice, represent the Bennington Rutland District, Danby, Dorset, Landgrove, Mount Tabor, and Peru.
And I'm David Templeman, Orleans 3, Brownington, Barton, and Westmore. Thank you.
Charles Wilson from Caledonia 3, which is Lindenville, Sheffield, Wheelock, Sutton, and Newark.
Henry Pearl, I represent the towns of Danville, Peacham, and Caddo.
Jed Lipsky, Lamoille 1 District, represents Stowe.
Roger Graham, Orange 1, represent Williamstown and Charleston.
Good, and we've got, I think, maybe one committee member who's joining us on Zoom. Representative Levitt?
She had to run out to grab something.
Okay, so she may hop back in, and then maybe another committee member or two who'll be joining us. Maybe one other who'll be joining us in the room. But why don't you go ahead, Sarah? We'd love to hear whatever you'd like to share with us this morning.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And it's nice to meet you all. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this morning and to share a bit about Poultney's story, which is an evolving story. And we'll do that in the form of a presentation that was originally prepared for American Trails. It was presented a year ago under the title, Revitalizing Rural Economies and Strengthening Main Streets Through Trails. I provided Laura the link to the full video presentation, which was attended by over 700 people across the country. So if anyone on the committee wishes to view that after this, Laura does have that link. And my plan for today was to provide a condensed presentation based on that original presentation. But I'll give you a bit of background about my experience first, just to shed some light on my perspective on this work. I worked for 15 years for a consultancy that's based in Middlebury called Landworks. The consultancy was a small firm, interdisciplinary, that specialized in planning, landscape architecture, and graphic design. And we did quite a lot of work for Section 248 and aesthetics in the state of Vermont over the course of that time, in renewable energy, Act 250, orderly development, and permitting around land use planning around the state of Vermont and also in New Hampshire and Maine. Prior to taking this role in Poultney, actually concurrent with, because this role was part-time for a while, I worked for the Rutland Regional Planning Commission on the SEDS that is in development for the West Central Vermont area. It's comprehensive economic development strategy. So my approach to this work is from an economic development perspective, which is what Poultney hired me for originally, part-time with a USDA grant in the aftermath of the closure of Green Mountain College. So I will share my screen and I'll tell you a bit more about that. Are you able to see that?
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome to Poultney. This first slide shows a view of Lake St. Catherine from atop one of Slate Valley Trails high points, and hiking trails, mountain biking trails, which is the basis for an evolving outdoor recreation economy that the town is working to develop. Poultney, as a starting place, I'm sure many of you know this, but a national audience did not. So Poultney is located on the Vermont-New York west border in the Lakes region of Western Rutland County, about halfway between Rutland and Glens Falls. It borders the Poultney River behind the former Green Mountain College. A bit about Poultney as a starting place. It's a population of 3,600 people in this town. Poultney considers itself to be small in size, but big in spirit, which is something that I certainly can attest to. The work that's been done in these past few years is incredible, and a testament to the folks that live in this community and the way that they've embraced the opportunity to transform their economy. Economic drivers that historically existed in Poultney were slate quarrying, light manufacturing, education, recreation, and agriculture. We have some photos of those historic economies, the slate carving, photo from Lake St. Catherine of ice fishing, some light manufacturing in the community that has existed for many years, and slate quarrying, which I already mentioned, sorry. Poultney is also home to the D&H Rail Trail, which we started to speak about a little bit last week. There are 4 rail trails that are currently managed by the State of Vermont Agency of Transportation under a new program that started just last year, Rail Trail Program. The D&H Rail Trail runs through Poultney. It also runs north through Castleton, and there's a missing segment, but it picks up back again in Paulette, which is south of Poultney. This rail trail is in the heart of Poultney Village, and it's a huge part of the work that we're doing to grow an outdoor recreation economy for Poultney and attract both new residents, but also tourism to the community. Poultney is also lucky to be the home of a state park. So we have a photo of Lake St. Catherine State Park here, which is it's receiving investment, which is really amazing in terms of how this is evolving in Poultney. The state is investing in the state park. There are new camping spaces that are being built this year. There's also a small mountain bike network that's on the park's grounds that has been developed to ultimately, hopefully, connect with the existing Slate Valley Trails network, which is accessed directly across the street from the entrance to the state park. So here we have a photo of Slate Valley Trails. So I'll just pause for a moment and give a little background on what that is. Slate Valley Trails is a purpose-built trails network system that is in Poultney. It also has some trail systems that are in Castleton and Wells, and I think just a little bit over the border with Middletown to our east. Slate Valley Trails has been building out their network since 2015 and has over 50 miles of trails at this point. So they are multi-purpose, primarily mountain biking in the summer, although there's a couple of trailheads that are for hiking only. But you can see that it's used year-round for cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, and recreation by many in the community. So I need to talk about the inflection point here in Poultney for just a moment. I'm sure many of you are also aware of the situation that the town found itself in 2019 when Green Mountain College closed after 180 years as the town's primary economic driver and really the source of its identity. Green Mountain College has been sold to a private investor. So in a period of I guess it's been about 3 years since we've been doing this work in economic development. The town has gone from wondering what would happen to its college campus and how it would be used and seeking a buyer to now having a multi-million-dollar 3-phase proposed redevelopment of the campus as part of its economic situation. And really the town is in an area where it's guiding growth at this point, in part based on what's happening at the college, but definitely also based on our trail systems. A little bit more about what happened at between 2010 and 2020. The census shows that Poultney was one of the hardest hit municipalities in the state of Vermont. It lost 12% of its population during that census period. So we have some work to do, not only in attracting businesses, but attracting new residents. A little bit more about the process that Poultney has undertaken to evolve itself to new economies. We've done a lot of planning, assisted by so many partners throughout the state, our Regional Planning Commission, our Regional Development Corporation, Vermont Council on Rural Development, and even the federal government. On the right-hand side, the slide area where it says you are invited, that was a planning program called overseen by the EPA called Recreation Economy for Rural Communities, which Poultney was selected and participated in its pilot round in 2021. So there's been an evolution here to try to help the town move through this period, starting all the way back in 2020. Poultney Comes Together was a community report and action plan overseen by Vermont Council on Rural Development in 2019. And then the RERC project is the most current planning project. Although one of the outcomes of that project was a Better Connections grant that the town received in 2021. So we are now involved in additional planning for infrastructure in the community. And I'd also note at this point that the RERC program that's overseen by the EPA is in its second round this year, and Granville, New York, which is a border town to Poultney, was selected for that project. So we are in a time where this is a regional consideration, a regional approach to attracting people to this area for the natural resources and the outdoor recreation resources that are there. So the goal of that project was to spotlight its recreational assets, encourage more residents and visitors to participate in recreation, connect nearby hiking bike trails to downtown, and work to attract new recreation economy investors. I'm going to speed it up a little bit because I see I'm already at 10:15, but these are all the folks that attended our workshops. There were 80 people, a lot of energy and excitement in Poultney around this work. Quickly, I'll go through our goals. We had physical connections which is essentially to connect our villages to the recreational trails through safe trail systems and making use of existing roadways as we can. To implement more downtown amenities and support business development. Goal 3 is engagement. So this is really important, and this is kind of where we're at right now. Increase youth, senior, and broader community engagement in outdoor recreation and community and natural resource stewardship. And then goal 4 was to establish a community brand for marketing purposes. We have a photo of our high school, which we are starting to connect with more readily, bringing high school students to the trails and teaching them a bit about the trails, that they're free, they're in their backyard, and teaching them how to become part of the sport and also to help maintain the trails. Most of this I've talked about. Community equals economy in this case. The kids are key, and that the community has had rich community conversations and has continued to evolve those conversations as the economy is evolving and becoming more apparent. A few quick introductions to folks that are leading the charge here. We've got Tim Johnson of Johnson & Son Bike Works. Tim is volunteering. He volunteers with the elementary school and the high school, brings kids out on bikes and makes sure that the community has access to bikes so that they can use those trails at their leisure. We have Ryan here, who is a teen that has taken a free mountain bike camp offered by Slate Valley Trails in collaboration with the Poultney Recreation the last few summers. And we've got Ryan and his friends who are starting to become stewards of the trails as well. Ryan Brian's dad, who is employed. He owns Riverside Motors, and he is a new mountain biker. So, it's really wonderful for us to see the entire community coming to this and participating in what's available. And then we have some other folks as well. These are locals. We've got Mark and Owen Teeter. Mark is on our planning commission and was recently appointed to the select board. So this is being driven by the municipality and embraced by the municipality as an incredible opportunity. Michelle McCarran, she's up there helping with the trails too. She is the former director of the local senior center. So we are, bringing it back to the community. And we've got the Poultney Public Library here, which is located on our main street, has been a partner to bringing the community into this work as well. And this is just a photo of a story walk that was set up on one of the trails. So we've got arts organizations in Poultney that we're lucky to have reclaimed as a makerspace. Poultney Rotary, we've got the Chamber of Commerce and the Poultney Snow Devils, which is the local VAST organization, and the Historical Society, all as partners to the community and creating connections to the recreational assets that are being developed. We've got some young folks on bikes, Lori shots here. And then we are gaining momentum. So the community is being created. Ambassadors are sharing the story for Poultney, and partnerships are being forged. As I mentioned earlier, we're assessing our infrastructure to ensure that it supports recreation economy. We're in the middle of a Better Connections Town to Trails project, which will conclude this fall. And we will have recommendations from our consultant about what to do next to continue this growth. We have strategic marketing happening, which is really important because Slate Valley Trails wanted to ensure that their growth in the community was incremental and didn't happen too quickly, and that it was embraced first by the community and second by people who are coming to use Slate Valley Trails or tourists. We are welcoming new businesses. Our main street is nearly full at this point. And we are in a process of guiding growth, which is amazing in that short period of time. A few numbers from Slate Valley Trails. They're out with their strategic plan at this moment and going to community groups to describe a bit more about their mission and where they're at right now. And I'd call your attention to some of the things that are on the bottom row. There's the total number of free community outings they saw in 2022 was 115. They have over 100 volunteers out taking care of those trails and participating in events, and over 50 youth volunteers, which is incredible. What's next? I touched on Green Mountain College a little bit already. There is a development plan that is proposed for that, and the college developers are part of this conversation as well, making sure that we connect the developments that are happening in Poultney, and that everyone is trying to work together to support the goals for the community and the identity for the community that's evolving. And this is a fun thing that was able to be installed. Actually, this was installed in 2022. We created an outdoor fitness garden for the senior center. The seniors, it's literally out their door. Our senior center in Poultney is well used and well loved. I think it will take a little while and some programming to make sure that this is fully used. But we are finding these ways to bring outdoor recreation economy to other populations that it's not typically associated with. And a little bit of marketing. So that is where Poultney's at. I'd be happy to entertain some questions if anyone has them. I realize that we have other speakers and I don't want to take up too much time here.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we do have time for some questions. Representative Lipsky.
Yes, Sarah, thank you. I think a lot of the communities, even a place like Stowe that is heritage recreation destination versus the efforts that Pulteney is developing, particularly with the loss of Green Mountain College as a main driver. But there was a pioneer trail builder from Lamoille County that left town about probably, I'll say 5 or 6 years ago, and rumored to go to Pulteney. Is that Slate Valley Trails? Is there any private public partnership there?
Yeah.
And are those two, is that guy ever merged in the town of Pulteney?
Thank you for your question. Yes, so this presentation was originally presented with Katrin Maloney, who is one of the owners of Sustainable Trailworks. Katrin and her husband Hardy are the drivers behind those 50 miles of trails. The trails are on private property, but it is public access, which is unique, I think, in Vermont's landscape of trails. But I think that's maybe who you're referring to, and there's definitely a collaboration between the municipality and the trail builders and the folks who are behind the landowners, the folks who are behind the Slate Valley Trails network being built out.
Impressive.
Representative O'Brien?
So it's funny coincidence that this last weekend, my wife and I went out driving and we went through Tinmouth, Middletown Springs, and Pulteney and had a picnic at Lake St. Catherine State Park. So I can see just what you're talking about here. My question was, how do you involve the other towns in the sort of vision here? Like, each town, has different assets, and I'm just wondering if there's sort of a rising tide sort of equation here, or whether some towns, just like a Stowe, just have a lot more assets than Tunbridge.
Thank you. That's a great question too. I mean, Pulteney is incredibly fortunate because it has so many of those assets. It was a natural fit to make this evolution with the state park and with the trail network. We are, really some of the smaller communities that are surrounding Pulteney are interested in the trails, like they're using them for their own purposes. And that helps in terms of community building. I think Slate Valley Trails has spent the first 5 years really building the trail network, and now is in the process of taking it out just to those smaller municipalities, and using Pulteney as a regional, trying to create a regional draw really, and making sure that the marketing around it, it was really important that we weren't marketing this nationwide when we weren't ready. And I think that's part of it too, making sure that some of the smaller communities know that this is being built, how they can use it for tourism, for their businesses or for their community, and taking our time with it.
You showed the picture, Sarah, of the skiers on the multi-use trail earlier in the presentation. It looked like it was groomed, or it was possibly a snowmobile had gone through. How is that handled?
Currently, Slate Valley Trails is grooming some parts of its network as a nonprofit. It's a chapter of VIMBA, Vermont Mountain Biking Association. So I think they do rely on VIMBA for some of their needs, but they are taking that on. We are starting to get to the point where the community, the town and municipality is more involved in that type of work, or starting to become ready to have those conversations about how can we help. We're focusing on our roads first of all. Route 140 is a small rural road that cuts right through the heart of their network, and the town is focusing on creating safe ways to cross that road through our Better Connections project. Also making sure that we have bike paths where we need them, either on the road or building out the network so that it connects. So I think, at this point, Slate Valley Trails has most of that in hand, but ultimately the conversation will be about how can the community assist. And I think one of the things that I heard last week from Cindy that I really noted and resonated with me is that VTGC had gone out on a limb in terms of hiring someone. And I would say that Poultney has done the same with my position, really. I'm the only community development director that exists in Rutland County at this time. My position was part-time as an economic development coordinator until just this past January, when the town decided that there really is something here, and we can, if we can spend more time guiding growth and really connecting with the trails, that we can have a home run, we can be successful. But they used ARPA funds to fund some of my position. And so I would say in some regards that the municipality is a little bit out on a limb as well.
Representative Lipsky.
Sarah, another question, because some of us in this room also participate in the rural caucus, are very active in that. And rural Vermont that has bacon in small villages, the local general stores closed, disappeared, unsustainable. So I'm very impressed that Poultney is filling up its main street. And we're all dealing, Vermont is under pressure from a phenomenon that we'll call climate emigration. I don't know if it's immigration or emigration, but people from less sustainable eco locations are coming here, either work remotely or start a business. So the economic driver of your role, economic development and outdoor recreation, becomes a very attractive tool for many parts of Vermont. I've been to Poultney. That's actually a very pretty part of Vermont. There aren't many parts that aren't pretty, to be honest with you, but your location, you've got east-west Route 4, you're adjacent to the state line, but you lost 412 residents from one census to the last census. Are you seeing folks actually moving to and becoming part of your community as residents and as part of that growth? Do you see that population loss turning a corner?
Yes, thank you. That's a great question. We are anecdotally, it's a little difficult to measure, and we've been so busy, we haven't had the chance to stop and measure. But we are, yes, we are seeing new folks come to the community. One of the new businesses that opened is a bike shop, and it's unique apparently in the industry. I'm not a mountain biker myself, so some of this is a little bit above my head, but in the industry, this new bike shop is unique. So it's a destination unto itself. It's on Main Street. And some of the friends and family and acquaintances of this new business owner are starting to move to the community as well. So absolutely, we are seeing new residents. And I think one of the things that's important for me to touch on really is the approach to community development. When you build a place like this, people do enjoy living there, especially younger people. And it helps for new businesses to come to a community where there are people who have a high quality of life. Employers like that. They want their businesses to be located in places like this that have those types of assets so they can retain their employees. And it's kind of a nice, it's a win-win if you can do it correctly.
Representative O'Brien.
Sarah, just one nuts and bolts question. Is the trail private lands, public access, is it similar sort of the way VAST has an annual or potentially longer sort of contract easement with landowners? So like private landowner says, this is great, I'd love a trail, but potentially say that that piece of property sells, the next landowner says, I don't want these trails. I mean, just, can you talk about how that works?
Thank you. Yeah, I can talk about it just a little. The trail builders are the folks that really know the nuts and bolts of that a little bit more thoroughly. But yes, from what I understand, it is based on a process that's similar to what VAST uses, and there are easements and agreements in place. Most of the Slate Valley Trails network is held by one private landowner, so it wasn't a situation that similar to VAST, where you have to have easements from many different people. Nick might be able to weigh in on this a little bit, but yeah, so I understand that it's based on a similar process that VAST uses.
We have a trail builder here in the room also, and Sarah, maybe we'll let you. Welcome to, please stay if you have time, and if not, thank you for joining us this morning. But why don't we have Mariah come back up, and we'll all remember that a week or two ago we were right in the middle of the presentation.
Very seat.
Thank you, everyone. I will stay.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, and let's see if I can do this more smoothly this time. Second time's the charm, right? So thank you for having me back.
Right in the middle of a presentation, right?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. And so let me just get that back up so that way I can focus on all of you. And we'll do okay. That Sorry, I'm really not good at multitasking when it comes to a computer. We're going to start from here. Nice to see you all again. Thank you for having me back. And I will try to refresh us without boring us to get us back to where we were. I know that your brains have probably been in a lot of different places since I saw you last, and probably just even this morning. So Mariah Keggy, and I am co-vice chair, Trails and Greenways Council of 9 years, and 9 years on the council, and 27 years in professional trails. The last, I think, 9 or 10 years, I've been with our own business where I'm a trail designer, planner, builder, and co-owner. And we are based out of Morristown, though our work is all over the place, mostly Vermont. And, this actually for the last couple of years, only Vermont, which is great. It's nice to at least stay in our own state if we can't stay at home. And so I guess what I really appreciated that question about how those trails get there, right? And that's sort of what I want to share today about that piece about, Slate Valley and all of the work that happens. It was really great to see the photos of all the volunteers out there maintaining trails, because that's what primarily they were doing. And just sort of to bring back the bell a little bit of this weird thing about how trails get there that people do not think about. And, there's this whole industry behind how that happens, and most folks just get to enjoy them. And then that piece about, as long as they are sustainable and enjoyable, we get to maintain access to all of these private or public lands in that way. And so trails are a weird thing because it's strangely complex and people don't think about it. and so that's sort of what I have to share, and just in terms of a resource and thinking about, H131 and what goes into all of this. And then touching on a little bit of sort of some background that might be helpful in thinking about H85. In terms of accessible trails and how that fits in, especially as I know that you all also talked to Peter Jensen, he's also a professional trail builder with the Professional Trail Builders Association, as we are. So I did hear what you heard from him as well to catch up on it. So if I can do the present mode well now, let's see, I need to get this thing out of the way. Okay. There we go. We're on. It's happening. Okay, so again, we already talked about this, but just sort of a refresher about what we think about when all the time, especially like thinking about Slate Valley trails, right? This is a new trail. On public-private land, it doesn't matter. Either way, we need to be looking at these three spheres and sustainable trails being that piece right in the middle. That's what we're aiming for. It's sustainable for economy, environment, and socially in terms of making sure that, that we're creating thriving economies, thriving towns, and not a detriment to them. And stewardship really being the key point to that. And again, sort of, I think about this as how do we help people connect to nature while being able to enjoy the nature around them and not think about what's on their feet or under their tires. And that's our job, right? And so this is where we're behind the scenes. But the whole point of it is really connecting people to nature in whatever way they do that, right? And that's where, trails look like a ton of different things. From anywhere from, you could be mountain biking, you could be on a barely there footpath, right? Or you could be on an all persons trail that, that you're on with your family of all different ages and physical abilities. And so who are these people who do this work? We talked about, there's probably, I don't have the numbers, but I'm sure thousands of volunteers out there cleaning all those drains that I mentioned last week when I was here, that, a good sustainable trail should have a drain about every 80 feet, and that drain should be cleared twice a year at least, blowdowns removed and all that kind of stuff to keep the trail in good shape, to keep it enjoyable and sustainable. And so we have everywhere from that to our paid staff at nonprofits, like Kingdom Trails has their own trail crew. The Green Mountain Club has their own trail crew. And then we've got the crew leaders on there. So when you think about sort of like, workforce development and skill building and where people are, and then you've got their supervisors. And then sort of beyond that, then you have folks like ourselves who are, we get brought in for the more complex or challenging or bigger projects. And we're experts in what we do. And so, I feel like I touched on this a bit in terms of, anywhere from cleaning drains and that basic maintenance, which is really key to, if that isn't done, then you need to reconstruct a trail or you need to relocate a trail, which is far more expensive, right? And so we have all this huge amount of volunteer labor that is essentially free, that all of our wonderful partners who are nonprofits that are part of the BTGC, they're taking that entire load of training those folks, creating the infrastructure, helping them get tools, all of that. And that's how our trails end up not getting blown out. And then we have a lot of really blown out trails that are what we call legacy trails, that are a lot of, when you think about trails in Vermont, anything that's older would be a legacy trail. So it's the stuff that people built that, it wasn't designed, it wasn't planned. It was literally somebody going out, probably with their buddy, being like, hey, let's get from here to there. And I'd love to not have brush hitting me in the face, So they go and they just clear that out, and that becomes a trail, like our trails up Camel's Hump that Nick Bennett mentioned. The cost of the reconstruction is really astronomical. So once if a trail is not designed well, not planned well, not built well, then and not maintained, then you end up needing to repair it, right, or relocate it. And then there's that piece of, then there's also just the reconstruction of a trail, right? So then when it goes the next step. This is a picture from Perry Hill in Waterbury. This one section of trail blew out every year, at least a couple times a year. It's sandy, it was too steep, and was the main access up to this entire mountain bike network on state land. It was really popular. And it was just a disaster on multiple levels. There were actually some major injuries. There was even a death on this section of trail. And so we were hired to go in and rebuild it. And so this is, an example of when something's gone so far and it wasn't planned, right? They tried to maintain it, but it wasn't built well to start with, because it wasn't intended for the use that it was getting. And it's been great ever since. This was probably, 5 years ago, but it was massive and it was very expensive. So when you think about the cost of the maintenance and all that goes into the maintenance that then planning of good new trails compared to the cost of a project like this. It's really, and you think about efficiency, which is part of the sustainability piece, right? What's it cost to build a new trail? This is always a funny thing. We get these calls and it's like calling up an architect builder who's like, can you build me a house? What's it going to cost? And so that piece about, well, how big is your house? How many windows? So the thing about this is that we do have averages, though, to just sort of give you some perspective on cost of new trail versus, new trail of all varieties. The national average, it's $5 a foot. However, that's including places like out west where you can use like a mini bulldozer, it's called a Swaco, and just go through, right? There's like barely any rocks. There's no roots. And then in Vermont, we definitely don't have that situation, right? We've got drainages all over the place and all of that. So it's about $7 to $8 a foot on average, kind of regardless of what labor source you use, because it's, we don't have to go into that, but if you have questions about it, happy to answer that. For an average natural surface, 24-inch wide trail. But then when you talk about building, an all-persons trail, right? It's easily 4 to 5 times that per foot, anywhere from that to like, there's a beautiful, beautiful boardwalk right here. Mm-hmm. This might look familiar to folks. $450 a foot.
Oh my God.
But that experience, right? And so just to sort of put that out there and thinking about, this experience is amazing. This is so beautiful. It's so worth it. And it's expensive. And so when you think about sort of percentages of time, money, et cetera, and how important it is to have experiences like this, and then also looking at the whole landscape of trails in general and say, okay, well, how does this all fit in? And how can we help make sure that on a landscape scale of trails in Vermont, that we're really doing things right in terms of, and we're doing things efficiently. And, in terms of taking care of what we have, which is really key, and then figuring out places where we need these opportunities and how to pay for them and make sure that they're really great. And this is sort of that big piece that I'm going to touch on a little bit.
Where is that, Mariah?
This is up at Smuggler's Notch, Barnes Camp. Yeah.
Representative Lipsky?
Mariah, when you talk about cost per foot, are you talking about lineal foot or square foot?
Lineal. Yeah, but it's a weird trail builder thing. This is how we think about things.
And is that and did you say a 24-inch trail?
Well, so for the natural, so that average, which again, it's averages are whatever they are. But in general, we find that it's about $7 to $8 a foot on average for a, 24 to 36 inch wide soil that's on site trail. Right. And that's like, but then you add in, do you have drainages? Do you have bridges? Like how many culverts? How big do they need to be? Do they need to be bigger because of climate change and, and flooding events and all of this stuff that, so that's on average in a place that's a good place for a trail. Most of Vermont is not necessarily a good place for a trail. And so that's sort of that other piece. We don't, build wetlands in places. We build trails in wetlands only for an experience, right? That's not a good place for a trail. But for educational experiences and, that connection with nature, it might be, there might be some places that are appropriate, but, that's,
the Barnes Camp Trail, was that privately funded or publicly funded?
I don't have that in front of me, but I would bet you that it was an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. I know that, the driver behind that was the Green Mountain Club. Again, going back to the driver behind all of this are the VTGC folks, right? And then this was contracted out. The actual labor was contracted out to Josh Ryan, who's also a professional trail builder, was part of PTBA.
And that's elevated. Is that a fabric or is that some crushed?
So I'm pretty sure it's what is it called? It's a PTEX, the plastic, I'm forgetting.
Decking.
Yes, thank you, the plastic decking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure because that's become pretty standard, especially in places that you have a lot of moisture coming up. Because it lasts so long, because the whole thing, I mean, I could go on the stuff forever and we don't have this, but that aspect of, wood doesn't last. It just doesn't last. So every time you build an expensive wood structure, you know that it's going to have to be replaced. And the question is just when, whereas when you build with stone, ideally that's not the case.
Trex, I think it's.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, well, so Trex is the brand name, and then there's that it's like Xerox versus copy.
Right, okay.
And okay. And so, so that compared to this trail, this is a purpose-built mountain bike trail. And the berm takes a little bit more, it's a little bit more expensive, but actually helps reduce erosion. So just sort of some thoughts about that aspect of looking at like, okay, well, you are using the trail and then this is just built and the area outside of the trail has not been disturbed very much, right? So this is an idea of like, okay, so you're really limiting that impact, hence sustainable. And just this piece that I already touched on, that maintenance is really key. It's really the baseline to be cost effective and how we keep our trails safe. And so what I'd like to do is sort of in thinking especially about H85 and because, you're talking about either new trails or so H85, the accessible trails being a percentage of every new trail project. So the two options are either you take a trail that is already there and you bring it to a level of accessibility, thinking about, well, what standards are we thinking about with that? Because more accessible, if you're talking about accessible mountain biking, that's sort of, there are different standards to that than if you're talking about an all persons trail like Peter Jensen was referring to with you all, or like that boardwalk that we looked at, right? Those are different experiences. And just sort of, I sort of want to walk you through this process of how one plans a trail. Because I think it really also translates to the landscape level of how do we plan for trails in Vermont, because it's really just this planning process. And so the first piece is the vision and really articulating, who do you expect? Who are you desiring to use this trail? What do they look like? Where are they coming from? Like who are these people? And then once you have that clear, then you can say, okay, well, what experience are we wanting them to have? Is this primarily an educational experience? Do we want to bring them to this really cool spot, right? Like without thinking about what experience people are going to have on the trail, there's no way that you're going to get the intended experience in the end. And so you really have to be clear on that and really articulate that from the beginning. So that's the first step. And so when I sit down with trail, with clients, this is what we do. And then from there, then you assess, okay, well, we have this idea of exactly who we want to use this trail and what kind of experience they're going to have there. Because it can be quite varied, right? I actually would love it if everyone could just think for a minute about like one of their favorite places on a trail anywhere. Like, what was the highlight of that? Why did you love it? And everybody is going to have a different thing probably, and we'll have some things in common, but there's actually, it's actually laid out. There's like 20 or so different characteristics that one can choose from that have been articulated by certain groups who do a lot of this work. You can say, okay, it could be adventure, it could be play, right? It could be quiet and solitude, and all of that stuff. So really thinking about that. And then you say, okay, well, let's assess, is this possible? What does that look like? Is the land going to give us that opportunity is huge. And that's a lot of what I do in terms of like, okay, well, we only have this parcel. So again, I'm thinking all of Vermont is one thing, but then oftentimes we're looking at, okay, so you take all of Vermont and then you're like, okay, well, what are public lands or private lands we have access to? And in that same way of like, you have a whole parcel that maybe is an opportunity. And then you say, okay, well, these are the wetland areas. These are the places that are too steep. These are the places that, are sensitive for other reasons. And then we have these areas that are possibilities. And then if you say, well, I'm really looking for an accessible trail, say, all persons trail, or I'm really looking for, a beginner mountain bike trail. And what you've given me to work with is a steep piece of property. Those two might just not mesh. So there's this assessment piece that has to happen in terms of, okay, is this even possible with what we're looking at? How I would relate this to HID 5 particularly is that the other part of assessment is, well, it's just collecting data, like what's on the ground, right? So what's the inventory of what do you have already? Is it more efficient to take what you have and just sort of shift it around a little bit? But quite literally, where are your trails? Where are the opportunities now? And then where can we build this opportunity in a way that it makes sense and still fits that vision and that goal that you're really aiming for? And so this is like a really important part of it. And this is the reason why VTGC is suggesting an inventory being a really good starting place with, really trying to figure out, well, what do we have? And what does it look like in terms of accessible trails? And then saying, okay, well, how do we then design and urge people to design these really great opportunities that people deserve because they're underserved and have been for a while, that actually fit the goal of what you're thinking about, this goal and this vision. So that's, and then there's planning in terms of how do you actually make it happen, the funding, permits, all that kind of stuff. And then design, and then construction. And just sort of, this can sort of be transferred on all sorts of levels. And before if folks have more questions, I just sort of wanted to wrap up to just sort of reiterate I've been, like I said, on the council for 9 years. We have been working so hard to share the resources that we have as a group with all of you, with municipalities who don't have the supports of some of these nonprofits, with the state. And because we haven't had the staff people or anybody to sort of help us out with it, it's really been a struggle to actually move things along, like get our resources on the website, and all of that kind of stuff. And so there's that piece about, because if we're looking at Vermont as sort of a landscape level and all of the difficulties that we know Vermont is facing with folks sort of in terms of recreation, right? And our communities with, we'll say, invasive plants coming in, right? With our parcel sizes getting smaller, with new landowners having different ideas about what access looks like and posting and things like that. And sort of the opportunities, things getting harder for landscape level conservation and recreation, really creating this beautiful partnership. And VTGC is really, I think, just that landscape level view that's really key that each of these individual user groups just doesn't have. And so, so that's sort of the plug for H131 in terms of funding to help us do this work better, because we've been trying and we are doing it, but it's just going so slowly and we need to speed it up so we can really do things like make sure that trails are actually sustainable, enjoyable, safe, and expanded in the right areas, in the right ways that are applicable. And so, so that's what I got.
Thanks, Mariah.
Yeah.
Any questions? We're running a little bit late, so I don't want to keep our next guests too long, but Representative O'Brien.
Another detail from last weekend's trip was we stopped at the Mill River Gorge.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see that. And it was exactly the disaster you're talking about. It's this amazing asset. The trails are dangerous. It's you could fall over 80-foot cliffs into the river. There's no signage. There's wondered how proactive are the trails and greenways as far as identifying here's an amazing asset, but there's the town doesn't have it together to make it even safe or say, here's the way down to the Mill River without dying.
So there's that piece about what we strive for the council to be able to do, is to be able to invite those people in. And so grow our membership so that way we can actually share the resources more effectively, such as, how do you plan that project? Because, somebody in the town's noticing. The question is, do they have the skills, the knowledge, et cetera, to know how to make it happen? And so that's what we know how to do. And so there's that piece about we just want to be able to share our expertise as a resource better. Anything from how to get funding to how to plan a project to probably in that case, hire a contractor because you probably need some stairs in there that are complex, or hire, a well-trained youth crew or something like that. So that's part of what we're trying to do.
Other questions? Okay, well, are you going to be able to stay a little bit longer, or are you heading out?
Yeah, and I'll be able to stay a little bit longer.
Okay.
And just if there's any follow-up questions, really sort of the whole point behind all of this is just, share information and to just really let you know that we want to be a resource to all of you, because this stuff is strangely complex and very, it's expert in a very weird way. And so anything that we can help with.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for making the time. Yeah, for sure.
We're late. I think maybe we should take a short break. We will start promptly at 11:10. And thank